We're here with track and field, kind of recapping last weekend. Last weekend, the Jacks had their final regular season meet of the year at the Raider Invitational in Ashland, hosted by Southern Oregon. Now we have an off weekend before the Jacks get ready to go to the CCA Champs down in San Marcos. So, Coach, for you, just kind of starting off, talk about your impressions of this weekend and just kind of getting the last regular season out of the way before conference.
Yeah, I think it was a good meet overall. We had a handful of athletes hitting lifetime or season bests in their events. Niz is one of those athletes. She PR'd in both the shot put and the discus this last weekend. We also had it was definitely a lower pressure meet in terms of for those athletes coming back from LA where there was a ton of lifetime bests. It was a little bit of like a settling. They weren't all hitting PRs up in Raider, but they all did very well and were performing very closely to those personal bests. So overall, it was a great weekend.
Awesome. And Niz, for you, talk about just having the opportunity to, not the opportunity, but just talk about being able to PR going into the conference meet, having a couple really successful outings in the throw ring as you kind of get ready for like the time you want to be peaking at the conference championships.
Yeah, definitely. It was a really good meet for me, and I think it gave me a lot of confidence going into conference, knowing that I'm on the right track after PRing, and hopefully being able to PR again at conference.
And again, for both of you, just how nice was it to kind of have more of a laid-back atmosphere compared to, you guys have done a lot of traveling over the spring compared to years past, coming off of a really high-profile competition the week before in Los Angeles. How nice was it to kind of have that laid-back approach with the majority of your team before you go into the conference meet?
I think it was really nice personally. I think our athletes appreciated the closer travel, only being a few hours away. I know we all appreciated getting home a little bit earlier on Saturday night in terms of just getting a little more time to recover. But I also think that the meet at Ashland has always been historically a really good meet for our program. Like I said, it's a lower pressure meet. It's a little bit smaller of a meet. And I think it allows coaches and athletes to really work closely together, whereas some of the bigger meets, it's harder to really coach your athletes at those meets because they're farther away from you and there's more things limiting you from accessing them. This is a smaller meet format where it's really easy to actually talk after each throwing event or after each jumping event and get that feedback that you need to go back into the competition and try to perfect whatever it is you're working on. So I think it was just a really good opportunity to kind of fine-tune things. And our throwers especially had a really great weekend, several of them hitting lifetime bests in their throwing events. So I think this type of meet kind of helped that pave the way to make that possible.
Yeah, like Sarah was saying, having a coach's feedback, I was able to get feedback after every single throw. And throughout all my throws, I think I improved my mark every single time, and having coach's feedback after every throw was definitely really helpful. And also just the short travel time was really nice.
Oh, certainly. And so now you guys have a week off of competition, kind of a week to recuperate before you head to the conference meet next weekend. What is the kind of the approach this weekend in training and in practice, just kind of getting your athletes and getting prepped for the conference championships?
It's sort of same as usual in terms of practice, with the only exception being we don't have to have a long drive in there on Friday and Saturday. So it's, again, really going to be nice for recovery physically and also just emotionally, having a little bit of a mental break, having a little more time to ourselves, being able to sleep in our own beds. I think all the athletes appreciate that, not having to deal with meals on the road. So it's going to really give us a little bit more time to recover before we head into that big conference championship where you want to go into it not just physically fresh, but psychologically feeling fresh, feeling excited to get back to your event because you took a weekend off and you're feeling antsy and hungry for it. So we're looking forward to that. We haven't really had that break all year, so I think everybody is a little bit tired and really looking forward to having this weekend off. And I think it's going to allow us to feel a lot more refreshed going into championships.
I guess don't want to not. I guess I'll just ask a question kind of going into the conference championships. I mean, one thing I know that not that it presents an issue, but obviously like the changing conditions, the heat that typically is down in that area. How much does that, I guess, just factor into the plan? I feel like it's probably a bit different. I mean, I know you were just down there with this, smaller contingent of athletes, not this past weekend, but the weekend before. So how do you kind of factor in that adjustment with these training over the next few weeks to also try and make sure you're primed for that?
It really doesn't affect our training per se too much, but what it does affect is, just reminders about hydration, food intake, meal timing, things like that. Just continuing to learn for each individual event group what they need to be successful. Distance runners running in the heat are going to have a different response than a sprinter running in the heat. It's going to benefit the sprinter, the jumper, more so than it would the distance runner who is running lap after lap after lap in that heat. So it's really just coaches having those kind of individual or small group meetings with event groups to try to prepare them for what's to come so that they can prepare their bodies and fuel properly in terms of what they're eating, what they're drinking, the amounts, and the timing, most importantly. But, aside from that, the weather, I don't anticipate to be a huge change for us. We have competed at that track earlier this year. That's why we made that big trip down there in March. And we've competed in some heat. It was actually pretty warm up in Ashland this weekend, which was really nice for the majority of our athletes. Good contrast to the majority of the season that was pretty cold.
Got it. And I mean, you talked about the fine-tuning aspects. I mean, how would maybe, one thing that I think is just curious is, when you talk about these season plans, what kind of fine-tuning have you prepared maybe for this year that maybe, how is it similar to plans you've installed kind of over past years and kept with? What are maybe changes you made for this year? I'm just curious a little bit about what that fine-tuning might look like.
I don't think there's been any major changes in terms of like our programming. But really it comes down to the individual athletes and what their needs are, and being responsive to their needs in terms of, we learn throughout the season, what does this athlete need in order to be successful? How do they respond to these types of workouts? How much more recovery does this athlete need than another athlete after a particular workout? So it's a pretty individual plan based on individual needs of athletes and those training groups. But it's really just the coaches trying to be reflective on how things have gone, and trying to use that information and that knowledge to help us better prepare for what's to come.
Got it. Well, thank you, Coach.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.